breaking news from Berlin, where lawmakers have elected conservative Friedrich Merz as Germany's new chancellor after his historic defeat in the first round earlier today. In the second vote, Merz received 325 votes, needing 316 to win. 289 MPs voted against him. His new coalition now has a slim majority. Merz was widely expected to win the first time, and as the parliamentary ballot was anonymous, it's not clear who within his own government voted against him. Merz is the only candidate in Germany's post-war history to have failed in the first round. Let's go straight to the German parliament, to DW chief political editor Michaela Küfner. Michaela, what a day. Party leaders must feel relief now.
Yes, absolutely. There is a huge sense of relief amongst the future coalition of the Conservative CDU-CSU and the Social Democrats. And at the same time, they really want to get over this. They are keen to talk this down and say, look, this were a few individual MPs who probably were disgruntled. It's no big deal. But the damage has been done to a certain degree, because instead of having this as the high point of Merz's rise to become the German Chancellor, there really was no glory in this in the end. There was simply relief that they got it done in the end.
No glory, but they did get it done. Merz has since left Parliament. Where is he and what happens now?
Yes, he's headed over to the German president, who is the highest office in Germany, largely a ceremonial role. But as we learn time and time again, when it comes to these key constitutionally relevant events like the election of a chancellor, he is absolutely key. There he receives his certificate appointing him, then he comes back into parliament, and then he swears the oath on the German people, and if he wants to, on the Bible, which I'm sure he will do. And then we see a similar procedure for his cabinet as well. They pick up their appointments and then head back to Parliament, where they too swear the oath on the German constitution. So a bit of procedural ongoings here in Parliament, but there's no comparison to the tangible tension there was following that setback for Friedrich Merz in the open parliament this morning.
Yeah, there's plenty of people still in the halls of the Bundestag. How have Conservatives and Social Democrats, the two parties who will make up this new governing coalition, reacted to what's been going on today?
Well, clearly, after that setback, they started talking to each other what the next steps should be. Then there was a lot of deliberation, and they made a conscious decision not to blame each other, because blaming each other is essentially what saw the last coalition implode here in Germany. So I also heard reports from Friedrich Merz going into his own parliamentary group and saying, look, we're not going to play the blame game here now. We are going to treat each other very kindly, the way we want to be treated and treat each other once in government. And that now delivered a success, and we will never learn whether this was a scheme to deal him a blow deliberately and go into a second round, or whether there was also an element of a lack of understanding of what it actually means in procedural terms, because there were hours of consultations with lawyers whether a second vote, and it's historically the first time that this even was an issue here in modern day Germany, whether that could go ahead and be beyond any doubt of being challenged in court. And that's the conclusion that the lawyers here came to today, which allowed for that second vote to go ahead.
Now, the far-right AfD had quite a day as well. They were having a field day with all of this, to be quite frank. You talked to co-leader Alice Weidel of the party earlier. How are they reading this bumpy start for Merz?
Well, Alice Weidel doesn't see Merz is someone who has the stuff that is needed to be Chancellor. That is no surprise. She leads the opposition party, the strongest opposition for the second time, the far-right Alternative for Germany, which has just been labeled an extremist party by Germany's Office for the Protection of the Constitution, essentially domestic intelligence service. It has always criticized Friedrich Merz. It criticizes his unwillingness to actively cooperate with them. Having said that, Friedrich Merz had a lot of critics within his own camp over his move ahead of the elections to actually allow the AfD to vote with him on a non-binding motion that is tougher on migration. So that's something the AfD had celebrated. There's a sense of disappointment that Friedrich Merz has pegged his own political career onto the pledge of that firewall of non-cooperation with the far-right AfD. And interestingly enough, while procedurally being treated correctly and there being congratulations for several birthdays within the AfD, including the co-leader Tino Kropala, all parliamentary groups were keen to stress that they found the majority to drop time limits that needed to be dropped for the second vote to go ahead without any help from the AfD party. So it has clearly been isolated here politically today, while at the same time being back in force, having doubled its share in the last elections to just above 20 percentage points.
Exactly. The four remaining parties stressed that they had reached consensus among all democratic parties, as they said. That was Michaela Küfner, DW Chief Political Editor. Thanks so much. As we heard, Friedrich Merz is the first Chancellor candidate in Germany's post-war history to fail to win the office in the first vote in Parliament. That initially unleashed a wave of uncertainty in Germany and beyond. Here is how it unfolded in the Bundestag.
This was not the moment he'd been waiting for. The Member of Parliament, Friedrich Merz, has not received the required majority of at least 316 votes. In accordance with Article 63, paragraph 2 of the Constitution, he has not been elected Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. After a shock result in the first round, Conservative figures rallied round their choice to replace Olaf Scholz.
Let me be clear. As a coalition, the Conservatives and the SPD will put forward Friedrich Merz again for a second vote. He received lengthy applause during the Conservatives' meeting for going unified into the second vote. It's so important not to play games, not to settle old scores, but to remember what is at stake for everyone.
The response from the far-right AfD, the second largest party in the German parliament, was less than positive.
I've never seen anyone break all their election promises like Friedrich Merz. Such an untrustworthy, characterless person like Friedrich Merz must not become Chancellor of this country, and that is exactly what the Bundestag has proved here today.
Shockwaves from Berlin felt all the way in Frankfurt as the stock market reacted to the news, and ripple effects were felt beyond Germany. When Merz's party won the election, he promised stability, increased spending, both domestically and on defence. He said the world wouldn't wait for Germany to step up. In the second vote, 325 votes in favour, 289 against, 1 abstention. In accordance with Article 63, paragraph 2 of the Constitution, he has been elected Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. A majority, making Friedrich Merz, after an unprecedented and rocky start, Germany's 10th Chancellor.
DW's Chief International Editor Richard Walker is here in the studio with me and has been following this entire day with me, but also with Terry before me. So you've been on this for a really long time. Thank you so much. We're getting reactions from international leaders to the election of Friedrich Merz.
So I think pretty much the first leader to respond was Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. And I think that's a signal that few countries have more at stake in what happens in Germany than Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
Ukraine obviously still trying to fight against this invasion by Russia, facing the prospect that the Americans are getting strongly disinterested in supporting them, potentially even sort of swinging more to a Russian view of this whole conflict. Vladimir Zelensky is saying, I sincerely congratulate Friedrich Merz that Ukraine is deeply grateful for the support of Germany, but saying we sincerely hope that Germany will grow even stronger and will see more German leadership in Europe. And I think, so you see there him trying to kind of balance both being grateful to Germany for what's happened so far under the previous government. And under the previous government led by Olaf Scholz, Germany was the biggest provider of weapons and funding to Ukraine after the United States, so the biggest of the European providers. But they were often, they often got accused of being slow and being reluctant to provide bigger and bigger weapons.
And not wanting to take the first step.
Exactly. So, and I think, Merz has been given out signals that he'll be a bit more kind of out front with other European powers, but for instance, that he's open to providing cruise missiles, which his predecessor didn't want to do. So Zelensky, I think, obviously hoping that Merz makes good on those noises that he's made as leader of the opposition, and that Ukraine can get as much support from Germany, and that will have knock-on effects in terms of other European countries supporting Ukraine. The more the Americans fall away, the more crucial what the Europeans do in terms of Ukraine gets.
We've also heard from Emmanuel Macron.
Yeah. So I was about to tell you that I think Zelensky is the only world leader who has provided a response. But Macron actually just came in just before we came on air. So let's have a look at what he said. So he said, congratulations to Chancellor Friedrich Merz. It's up to us to make the Franco-German engine and reflex stronger than ever. So Franco-German engine, what he's referring to there is this idea that the European Union, this huge organization of trying to get European countries to cooperate and integrate further, that it really depends on France and Germany, the two biggest players, working well together. And Macron and Merz's predecessor, Olaf Scholz, basically weren't really getting on so well during much of this period. Very different characters in particular. Macron, somebody would go out, make a bold speech and say, I want to do this, this and this, and Scholz would be, oh, I'm not so sure. Yeah. Merz, I think, has a bit more of the Macron style. He sees himself as somebody who's bold, who's out there. Some say it's almost impulsive, So I think that there are some character traits. Of course, we'll have to see whether those similar character traits actually kind of create friction between the two, or if it works. But certainly a sign, I think, of the hope in France that this new government can be more effective and show more leadership than the previous government. But I think what happened today will raise questions about whether Merz really can do that.
Yeah. We've talked Ukraine, we've talked European stability. Will those be Merz's main international priorities?
Well, they're a big part of it, but of course, there are others too. The United States. I mean, we obviously have the Trump administration has come in. It's really more radical than the first Trump administration. It's been, showing signals that it doesn't want to keep supporting Ukraine for much longer in the war against Russia. It is making more noises about wanting to reduce its commitment to European defence. There's even more and more speculation that Donald Trump, if it was up to him, would just probably walk away from NATO. So Friedrich Merz has been talking about this a lot in recent months, pretty openly, saying that Europe needs to stand on its own 2 feet in terms of defence. But he's also going to need a functioning relationship with the United States. You can't just kind of completely make a cut. And, in terms of the trade relationship will also be important. But a lot of this goes through Europe. The trade relationship is managed through Europe. How Europe sets itself up in terms of defence, that is seen very much as a European project. So I think Europe, and the signals from Merz are coming that Europe will be a major focus for him. But we haven't even talked about China yet. And Germany has a massive trading relationship with China. There have been concerns that it's too dependent on China, that it needs to kind of cut that dependency. But it's a dilemma for any German government because, if they start pulling out of China, then they may lose access to the Chinese market, which could have knock-on effects for German companies. So the number of dilemmas and difficulties for Merz internationally are pretty huge. So he'll be relieved that he's at least getting into office after a very bumpy start.
Yeah, and he has his work cut out for him. Thank you so much.